The morning of Emma's graduation dawned bright and cloudless. The kind of perfect June day that promised new beginnings. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing down the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. My daughter's high school graduation. The culmination of 18 years of midnight fevers, homework battles, and proud moments that had shaped us both. My reflection showed a woman of 42 who had weathered life's storms with grace, though the fine lines around my eyes told stories of sleepless nights and quiet sacrifices. "Mom, have you seen my good heels?" Emma called from her room, her voice carrying that familiar mix of excitement and nervousness that had characterized her senior year. "Check the closet in the guest room, sweetheart," I replied, fastening the pearl earrings my mother had given me for my own graduation so many years ago. "Your father should be here soon." The words felt strange on my tongue. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. David had been increasingly distant over the past few months, working late more often, taking mysterious phone calls in another room, and deflecting my questions with the practiced ease of someone who had mastered the art of evasion. When I'd mentioned it to my sister Claire, she'd suggested it might be a midlife crisis. But something deeper in my gut whispered that it was more than that. Emma appeared in my doorway, radiant in her cap and gown, her dark hair, so like mine, cascading in waves over her shoulders. At 18, she possessed a confidence I envied, the kind that came from being loved unconditionally and encouraged to chase her dreams. She was headed to Northwestern in the fall, pre-med, with a full scholarship that had made David and me so proud we'd cried when the acceptance letter arrived. "You look beautiful, honey," I said, reaching out to adjust her cap. "Your dad is going to be so proud." "Where is he anyway?" Emma glanced at her phone. "He was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago." I checked my own phone, finding no messages from David. "You know how traffic can be. He'll be here." But even as I spoke the words, a familiar knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. David had been forgetting things lately. Dinner plans, Emma's final concert, our anniversary dinner reservations that I'd had to cancel when he showed up 3 hours late with alcohol on his breath, and a story about a client emergency that felt rehearsed. The doorbell rang, and Emma's face lit up. "That's probably him now." But when I opened the door, I found Mrs. Henderson from next door, holding a casserole dish and wearing the kind of expression people reserve for funerals. "Sarah, dear," she said, her voice unnaturally gentle, "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to bring this over for after the ceremony." "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Henderson, but you really didn't need to—" "Actually," she interrupted, glancing past me to where Emma stood in the hallway, "I was wondering if I could have a quick word with you, privately." Something in her tone made my blood run cold. I stepped onto the front porch, closing the door behind me. "Sarah, I don't know how to say this, but I think you should know." Mrs. Henderson's weathered hands gripped the casserole dish tighter. "I saw David this morning. He was loading suitcases into his car. When I waved, he just drove off without acknowledging me." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced my expression to remain calm. Maybe he was taking something to the dry cleaner, or— "There were a lot of suitcases, dear, and—" She hesitated, clearly struggling with whether to continue. "There was a woman in the passenger seat, blonde, much younger." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the porch railing, my knuckles white against the painted wood. "I see. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I debated whether to tell you, especially today of all days, but I thought you had a right to know." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my shoulder gently before heading back to her own house, leaving me alone with the devastating truth I'd been trying to ignore for months. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Emergency at work. Can't make graduation. Tell Emma I'm proud of her." 17 words to dismiss 18 years of marriage and abandon his daughter on one of the most important days of her life. No apology, no explanation, just a coward's exit disguised as professional obligation. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Emma didn't need to know. Not today, not on her graduation day. When I walked back inside, Emma was applying lip gloss in the hallway mirror. Was that Dad? "Just Mrs. Henderson bringing us a casserole," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "Dad's running a bit late." But he'll meet us at the school. The lie came easily, born from a mother's instinct to protect her child from unnecessary pain. I would figure out how to tell her the truth later, after the ceremony, after she'd had her moment in the spotlight she'd worked so hard to earn. The drive to the school passed in a blur of Emma's chatter about her friends, her plans for the summer, her excitement about college. I responded appropriately, but part of me remained trapped on that porch, replaying Mrs. Henderson's words and the image of David driving away with another woman while his daughter prepared for her graduation. The school auditorium was packed with families, all dressed in their best clothes and carrying flowers and cameras. I found our reserved seats, 3 chairs in the 5th row, and placed my purse on David's empty chair, a small act of defiance that made me feel slightly less powerless. "Where's Dad?" Emma asked as she prepared to join her classmates. "He's parking," I lied again. "You know how crazy the parking situation gets. Go find your friends. I'll save his seat." Emma hugged me tightly, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe in her familiar scent of vanilla shampoo and dreams. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." As she walked away to join the line of graduating seniors, I felt the full weight of David's betrayal settle over me like a heavy blanket. He was going to miss this. He was going to miss watching his brilliant, beautiful daughter receive her diploma and give her valedictory speech. He was going to miss the moment when she looked out into the audience, searching for his proud face. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and circumstance, literally. As the graduates filed into the familiar strains of Elgar's march, I scanned the crowd for David's face, still holding on to some foolish hope that he would appear, that there was some reasonable explanation for everything. But as the minutes ticked by and Emma took her place among her classmates, the empty chair beside me became more conspicuous. Other parents glanced over with sympathetic looks, and I found myself creating increasingly elaborate lies about David's absence when well-meaning neighbors asked where he was. "Emergency surgery," I told the Johnsons, whose son sat next to Emma in AP chemistry. "Important client meeting that ran long," I explained to Emma's English teacher. "Stuck in traffic from the airport," I informed David's golf partner and his wife. Each lie chipped away at my dignity a little more, but I told them anyway, desperate to maintain the illusion of a normal family for just a few more hours. Emma's speech was beautiful, eloquent, and heartfelt, touching on themes of perseverance, gratitude, and the importance of chasing your dreams even when the path seems uncertain. As she spoke, her eyes searched the audience until they found mine. I smiled and gave her a thumbs up, but I could see the confusion in her expression as she noticed her father's continued absence. When they called her name for the diploma presentation, I stood and cheered louder than anyone else in the auditorium, trying to make up for the missing voice that should have been beside me. Emma walked across that stage with her head held high, but I caught the moment when she looked toward our section, and her smile faltered slightly at the sight of David's empty chair. After the ceremony, as families gathered outside for pictures and congratulations, Emma made her way through the crowd toward me. Her joy was tempered now with concern, and I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. "Mom, where is he really?" she asked quietly, pulling me aside as her friends and their families swirled around us in celebration. I looked at my daughter, this remarkable young woman I'd raised to value honesty and integrity above all else, and knew I couldn't lie to her anymore. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you about your father." "Sarah," a voice called out behind me. I turned to see Janet Mitchell, one of my closest friends from the PTA, hurrying toward us with her phone in her hand. Her face was flushed with excitement, but when she saw Emma standing beside me, she hesitated. "Oh, Emma, congratulations, sweetheart. You were absolutely wonderful up there." "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell," Emma replied politely, but I could see she was still waiting for answers about her father. Janet looked at me meaningfully. "Sarah, could I have a word with you for just a moment?" "Mom, what's going on?" Emma's voice carried a note of growing alarm. "Nothing, honey. Just give us 1 second." I followed Janet a few steps away, and she immediately pulled up something on her phone. "I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news," she whispered, "but I thought you should see this before someone else shows you." She handed me her phone, and I found myself looking at a Facebook post from David's company's summer picnic, an event I didn't even know had happened. The photo showed David with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, a petite blonde who looked to be in her early 30s. They were both smiling at the camera with the easy intimacy of a couple. The caption, posted by a coworker I barely knew, read, "Dave and his beautiful girlfriend Melissa at the company picnic. So happy for these two." The date stamp showed it was posted 3 hours ago. "There are more photos," Janet said gently. "They look close." "I'm so sorry, Sarah." The phone slipped in my hands as the full scope of David's deception became clear. Not only had he left us on Emma's graduation day, but he'd been flaunting his affair publicly, humiliating me in front of people we'd known for years. The company picnic we'd talked about attending together, the one he told me was canceled. "Mom?" Emma's voice seemed to come from very far away. I handed the phone back to Janet and turned to face my daughter, whose expression had shifted from confusion to growing understanding as she read the situation unfolding around her. "Your father isn't coming," I said simply. "He's left us, Emma. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, especially today." Emma's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, anger, and finally a kind of steely resolve that reminded me powerfully of my own mother. "He left on my graduation day?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Emma looked around at the celebration continuing around us. Families taking photos, grandparents beaming with pride, fathers lifting their daughters in congratulatory hugs. And something hardened in her expression. "Then we don't need him," she said firmly. "We never did." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange haze. Emma and I took photos together, just the two of us, and she introduced me proudly to teachers and classmates as if nothing had changed. But I could see the hurt in her eyes, the way she flinched slightly whenever someone asked where her father was. By evening, word of David's departure had spread through our social circle with the swift efficiency of small-town gossip. My phone buzzed, constantly with messages of support, offers of help, and carefully worded inquiries about what happened. I turned it off after the 15th text and focused on trying to make Emma's graduation dinner special despite everything. We ordered Chinese food and ate it off my good china while Emma told me about her plans for the summer job she'd lined up at the local hospital. She was putting on a brave face, but I caught her checking her phone periodically, probably hoping for some word from her father. "He might still call," I said gently as we cleared the dishes. "I don't want him to call," Emma replied, but the quaver in her voice betrayed her. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea and finally allowed myself to process what had happened. 20 years of marriage had ended with a text message and a Facebook photo. David had walked away from everything we'd built together, and he'd done it in the most cowardly, hurtful way possible. But strangely, alongside the hurt and humiliation, I felt something unexpected: relief. The months of suspicion and anxiety were over. The walking on eggshells, the second-guessing myself, the feeling that I was somehow failing as a wife, all of it could finally stop. I was alone, but I was also free. Over the next few days, I began the practical work of untangling a life shared for 2 decades. I discovered that David had been methodically moving money out of our joint accounts for months, leaving just enough to cover the mortgage and household expenses. He'd canceled our joint credit cards and opened new ones in his name only. He'd even changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy without telling me. The man I'd thought I knew, the father who'd coached Emma's soccer team, who'd cried at her first piano recital, who'd talked for hours about her future, had planned his exit with cold precision, caring nothing for the emotional wreckage he left behind. But I didn't fight him. I didn't hire the most aggressive divorce lawyer I could find or try to destroy his reputation around town. Instead, I focused on Emma and on rebuilding the life we would share without him. I filed for divorce quietly, asked only for what was fair, and refused to engage in the kind of bitter warfare that would have hurt Emma more than anyone else. "You're being too nice," Claire warned me during one of our weekly phone calls. "He doesn't deserve your kindness, Sarah." "I'm not doing it for him," I replied. "I'm doing it for Emma and for my own peace of mind. I won't let his betrayal turn me into someone I don't recognize." Meanwhile, David seemed to be living his best life. According to the gossip network that operates with frightening efficiency in small towns, he'd moved in with Melissa in a trendy downtown apartment. They were seen at expensive restaurants, at the country club, at social events where David had once brought me as his wife. He'd apparently told people that our marriage had been dead for years and that he was finally happy. Emma refused all contact with him. When he called, she didn't answer. When he sent texts, she deleted them without reading them. When he showed up at her summer job to try to talk to her, she asked her supervisor to call security. "I don't have a father anymore," she told me one evening, as we worked together in the garden I was replanting to fill the hours that used to be occupied by marriage. "I have a mother who raised me and sacrificed for me and loved me unconditionally. That's enough." Summer passed quietly. Emma threw herself into her job and her preparations for college, while I focused on my work at the local library and the volunteer projects that had always brought me joy. People in town were kind, if sometimes awkwardly so, and I began to realize how much of my identity had been tied up in being David's wife rather than simply being Sarah. In August, just 3 weeks before Emma was scheduled to leave for Northwestern, the first crack in David's perfect new life appeared. I was grocery shopping when I ran into Tom Wheeler, David's former business partner. "Sarah," he said, his expression uncomfortable, "I've been meaning to call you." "Oh?" I paused in my examination of the produce, sensing something significant in his tone. "I thought you should know. There are some problems with the business. The accounting doesn't add up. We think David might have been creative with the books." The words hung between us in the produce aisle, heavy with implication. "I see," I said carefully. "We've had to call in forensic accountants. If they find what we think they're going to find—" Tom shook his head. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know this must be difficult for you." "Actually," I said, surprised by my own honesty, "it's not. Whatever David has done, it's not my responsibility anymore." That evening, I decided not to tell Emma about my conversation with Tom. She was excited about college, nervous about leaving home, and I didn't want to add her father's potential legal troubles to her emotional burden. But as the days passed, more information trickled out through the small-town gossip network. David had apparently been embezzling money from the business for over a year, using it to fund his affair and his new lifestyle. The forensic accountants had found evidence of falsified invoices, manipulated expense reports, and money transferred to personal accounts. Tom and the other partners were considering criminal charges. Meanwhile, Melissa, David's young girlfriend, was apparently becoming less charmed with her older boyfriend as the financial pressures mounted. According to Janet, who heard it from her hairdresser, who heard it from Melissa's co-worker, the couple had been fighting frequently, with Melissa expressing concerns about David's baggage and drama. I felt no satisfaction in hearing about David's troubles. If anything, I felt sad for the man he used to be, or the man I thought he used to be. The David who had held my hand in the delivery room when Emma was born, who had built her a treehouse with his own hands, who had once loved me enough to promise forever. That man was gone, if he had ever truly existed at all. The week before Emma left for college, we decided to celebrate with a mother-daughter weekend in Chicago. It was meant to be a fun bonding experience before she started her new life, but it turned into something far more significant. We were walking along the Magnificent Mile, loaded down with dorm room supplies and talking about her class schedule, when we heard a familiar voice behind us. "Emma! Emma, wait!" We both turned to see David hurrying toward us, looking haggard and desperate. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and there was something wild in his eyes that made me instinctively step closer to Emma. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked coldly, making no move toward the man who had once been her hero. "I had business in the city," David said, though his eyes darted nervously around the busy street. "When I saw you, I've missed you so much, sweetheart. Both of you." He looked at me then, and I saw desperation there that was almost painful to witness. "You look good, Sarah. Really good." "What do you want, David?" I asked quietly. "I want my family back," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've made terrible mistakes, I know that. But we can work through this. We can be a family again." Emma stepped forward, and for a moment I thought she might soften, might give him the forgiveness he was so clearly desperate for. Instead, she looked him directly in the eye and spoke with a maturity that made my heart ache. "You abandoned us on my graduation day," she said. "You humiliated Mom and broke our family apart for a woman barely older than me. You stole money from your business partners. And now you want us to feel sorry for you?" David's face crumbled. "Emma, please. I'm still your father." "No," Emma said firmly. "A father shows up. A father keeps his promises. A father protects his family instead of destroying it. You're just the man whose DNA I share. Sarah, please, David turned to me, his eyes filling with tears. Tell her. Tell her she doesn't understand. Tell her people make mistakes. She understands perfectly, I said gently. Emma is the smartest, most insightful person I know. She gets that from her mother's side. It was a small cruelty, but after months of humiliation and betrayal, I allowed myself that tiny moment of satisfaction. David stood there on the busy sidewalk, people flowing around him like water around a stone, and I watched something break inside him. The realization that his choices had consequence, that he couldn't charm or manipulate his way back into the life he'd thrown away, seemed to hit him all at once. I'm in trouble, he whispered. Real trouble. The business thing. It's bad. And Melissa, she's leaving. Me, she says she never signed up for all this drama. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I genuinely felt pity for someone who had lost so much through his own actions. I need help, he continued. Legal fees, maybe a character witness for court. Sarah, you know me better than anyone. You know I'm not a bad person, just someone who made bad choices. Emma looked at me, and I could see her waiting to see how I would respond. This was a teaching moment, a chance to show her how to handle someone who had betrayed you. David, I said carefully, I hope you find the help you need, but it won't come from us. You made your choices, and now you need to live with the consequence. Please, he said, his voice rising enough that people around us started to stare. Sarah, I'm begging you. I have nowhere else to turn. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you walked away from the people who loved you, Emma said. David's face twisted with frustration and desperation. You're my daughter. You're supposed to forgive me. You're supposed to love me no matter what. Love isn't unconditional just because we share blood, Emma replied. Love is earned through actions and kept through integrity. You threw both away. This is all your mother's fault. David suddenly exploded, his voice loud enough to make several passers-by stop and stare. She turned you against me. She poisoned your mind. No, Emma said firmly. You did that all by yourself. David looked back and forth between us, his face flushing red with anger and humiliation. You'll regret this, he said. Both of you. When I get back on my feet, when I prove everyone wrong about the business thing, you'll regret treating me like this. I doubt that, I said quietly. That's when he snapped. I should have left years ago, David screamed, his voice echoing off the surrounding buildings. You were a boring wife and a boring life. Melissa makes me feel alive. She makes me feel like a man. You made me feel like I was dying inside. People all around us had stopped to stare now, creating a small circle of observers to David's public meltdown. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I refused to be cowed by his tantrum. You're making a scene, I said calmly. I don't care, he yelled. I don't care who hears me. I wasted 20 years of my life pretending to be happy with you. 20 years I'll never get back. Then it sounds like leaving was the best thing you could have done for both of us, Emma said. David whirled on her, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little bitch! I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your fancy school, your clothes, your... He never got to finish the sentence. Later, witnesses would disagree about exactly what happened next, but I saw it clearly. David took a step toward Emma, his face twisted with fury, his hand partially raised as if he might actually strike her. And in that moment, as he lifted his foot to take another step forward, he simply collapsed. It happened so suddenly that for a moment nobody moved. David was standing there screaming at his daughter 1 second, and the next he was on the sidewalk, clutching his chest and making horrible gasping sounds. Call 911, someone shouted. Is there a doctor? We need a doctor. I found myself kneeling beside David, not because I wanted to help him, but because it was the right thing to do. Emma stood frozen beside me, her face pale with shock. What's happening? David gasped, his eyes wide with terror as he looked up at me. Sarah, what's happening to me? I think you're having a heart attack, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Just breathe. Help is coming. I can't breathe, he wheezed. It hurts. It hurts so much. A paramedic arrived within minutes. Apparently, there had been an ambulance nearby responding to another call. As they worked on David, loading him onto a stretcher and hooking him up to various machines, he kept trying to speak, "Sarah," he whispered as they prepared to lift the stretcher. "Sarah, please." I leaned down so I could hear him. "I'm scared," he said. "I'm so scared." "I know," I replied. "Just focus on breathing. Will you Will you come to the hospital?" I looked at Emma, who was still standing there in shock, and made a decision that surprised me. "We'll make sure you get there safely," I said. "But after that, David, you're on your own." He closed his eyes, and I couldn't tell if it was from pain or from the finality in my words. The ride to the hospital was surreal. Emma and I sat in my rental car, following the ambulance through Chicago traffic, both of us processing what had just happened: David's public breakdown, his vicious words, and then his sudden collapse. It felt like something from a movie rather than our real life. "Do you think he's going to die?" Emma asked quietly as we sat in the emergency room waiting area. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "The paramedics seem to think he'd be okay, but heart attacks can be serious." "Would you feel guilty if he did? Die, I mean?" I considered the question carefully. "I'd feel sad," I said finally. "Sad that he chose to spend what might have been his last moments on Earth screaming hateful things at the people who used to love him most, but guilty? No, I don't think I'd feel guilty." Emma nodded slowly. "I was so angry at him for leaving us," she said. "But watching him today, he looked pathetic, desperate. I almost felt sorry for him." "Feeling sorry for someone and wanting them back in your life are two different things," I reminded her. "I know. I don't want him back. I don't want him to die, you know." A doctor came out to speak with us about an hour later. David had indeed suffered a heart attack, but it was relatively mild. He would need surgery to insert a stent, and he'd have to make significant lifestyle changes. But he would recover. "Are you his immediate family?" the doctor asked. "His ex-wife and daughter," I clarified. "We're divorced. Is there someone else we should call?" The doctor consulted his chart. He listed a Melissa Rodriguez as his emergency contact, but we haven't been able to reach her. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Emma and I exchanged glances. Even in his moment of crisis, the woman he left us for had abandoned him. "We'll stay until you know he's stable," I told the doctor. "But we're not his family anymore." As we sat in the waiting room, my phone started buzzing with calls and texts. Word of David's public meltdown and collapse had already made its way back to our hometown through the network of people who'd witnessed it and looked up our local connections on social media. Janet texted, "Are you okay? Video of David screaming at you and Emma is all over Facebook. He looked insane." Video. Of course someone had recorded it. David's lowest moment, his complete breakdown, was now public entertainment. I showed the text to Emma, and she shook her head in disbelief. "Even his heart attack is going to be public," she said. "That's got to be humiliating." "Sometimes," I said. "The universe has a way of making sure people face the consequences of their actions very publicly. Is that what you call karma?" "I call it justice." We stayed at the hospital in Nissa until David was out of surgery and stable. He was groggy from the anesthesia, but awake enough to see us when we stopped by his room to say goodbye. "You came," he said, his voice weak but surprised. "We wanted to make sure you were okay," Emma said. "But we're leaving now." "Emma, please." "No," she said firmly. "You said everything you needed to say on the sidewalk, in front of all those people, in front of the cameras." David's face paled as the implications of that sank in. "There were cameras?" "It's 2025, Dad. There are always cameras." I could see David processing what this meant for his already damaged reputation, his legal troubles, his social standing. The man who had once been respected in our community, who had served on the school board and the hospital fundraising committee, had been reduced to a viral video of a middle-aged man screaming at his ex-wife and daughter on a busy street corner. "Sarah," he said desperately, Can you ask people not to share it? Can you tell them it was private? I can't control what other people do with information you chose to make public," I replied. "You said those things where everyone could hear them. The consequences are yours to deal with." "But it'll ruin me. The court case, my reputation, everything." "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. Not sorry enough to help him, but sorry that anyone had to experience the complete destruction of their life, even if they'd brought it on themselves. "We have to go," Emma said. "I start college in 5 days, and we still have shopping to finish." David looked at his daughter, brilliant, strong, beautiful Emma, who had once adored him, and I saw the exact moment when he realized he would never get her back. that his choices had cost him the most precious thing in his life, and no amount of pleading or explaining would ever repair the damage he'd done. "I love you," he whispered. "I know you think you do," Emma replied. "But love is more than words, Dad. It's actions and choices, and showing up when it matters. You chose not to do those things." We left him there in that hospital room, alone with his machines and his regrets, and drove back to our hotel. The next morning, we finished our shopping, had a nice brunch, and drove home to prepare for Emma's departure to college. The video of David's breakdown had indeed gone viral, at least within our extended social circle. By the time we got home, it had been shared hundreds of times on Facebook, posted to local community groups, and even made its way onto a regional news website with the headline, "Local Businessman's Public Meltdown Goes Viral." Emma and I were treated as heroes in the video, the dignified ex-wife and mature daughter who handled a difficult situation with grace, while David screamed and collapsed from the stress of his own bad choice. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of us and harshly critical of David. "Look at how calm and classy his ex-wife is," one comment read, "and the daughter is so mature. He lost the two best things in his life." "What a pathetic excuse for a man," read another, "having a tantrum on the street like a toddler. His family is better off without him." "Karma is a beautiful thing," someone else had written. "You abandon your family, you end up alone and sick. What goes around comes around." I didn't take pleasure in David's public humiliation, but I couldn't deny that there was something satisfying about the universe providing such clear evidence that actions have consequence. David had chosen to blow up his life publicly, and the public had judged him accordingly. A week later, I drove Emma to Northwestern. We spent the day getting her settled into her dorm room, meeting her roommate, and exploring the campus. When it was time for me to leave, we both cried, but they were good tears. Tears of pride and love and excitement for the future. "Are you going to be okay?" Emma asked as we hugged goodbye. "Living alone, I mean?" "I'm going to be better than okay," I told her. "For the first time in years, I'm going to be exactly who I want to be." And I was. Over the following months, as Emma thrived at college and David dealt with his legal troubles largely alone, I discovered who Sarah was when she wasn't defined by her role as someone's wife. I took art classes, traveled with friends, started dating again, and found joy in small daily pleasures that I'd forgotten I loved. David's business partners did press criminal charges for embezzlement. He pled guilty to avoid a trial and was sentenced to 2 years in minimum security prison and ordered to pay restitution. Melissa had indeed left him, taking with her some expensive jewelry and electronics that David couldn't prove she'd stolen. The viral video had made him unemployable in our town, so after he served his time, David moved to another state to start over. He sent Christmas cards for a few years, but Emma never responded to them, and eventually he stopped trying. Emma graduated from Northwestern summa cum laude and was accepted to medical school at Johns Hopkins. At her college graduation, I sat in the same auditorium where her high school journey had ended so traumatically, and I watched her walk across that stage with her head held high, surrounded by friends who loved her and family who had always been there. This time, there were no empty chairs, no lies to tell, no hearts breaking in the audience, just a mother who had raised an extraordinary daughter, and a young woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is someone showing you their true character early enough that you can make good decisions about who deserves a place in your life. As Emma gave her speech to her graduating class, she spoke about resilience, about the importance of integrity, and about how sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the doorways to our best lives. When she looked out into the audience and found my face, she smiled that brilliant smile that had been lighting up my world for 22 years. Later, at the graduation dinner I threw for her at a